Hello, everyone. I'm Rick Thomas. We're Daniel Berger. We're doing Life Over Coffee. We're in this series, this long-running series that's been so helpful, quite practical, quite informative. We're talking about suicide. Daniel, when we talk about suicide, one of the obvious questions that's going to come up is organic, biological. It's not just a spiritual issue. My brain made me do this. And so how do you want to go about, how would you address the question when they come and ask that I'm victimized by my biology, by my body? Where do you go with that question?
Yeah, so first of all, there's no evidence at all that the body causes people to commit suicide. So we need to start there. There's no known disease that makes you take your life. This is definitely a choice that people make, and there's both a planned but also an impulsive.
So there's a part of my brain, when it goes bad, I have no choice but to kill myself. You say that doesn't...
Correct.
When that breaks, I kill myself.
Yeah, we know of no place in the brain, in the genes, in the nervous system, and the chemicals of the nervous system, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
So can the body influence our decisions? And I would say absolutely yes. So what we do know is that lack of sleep, for example, impairs our discernment. I mean, we don't think as sharp as we should. Our mental acuity is very much diminished when we don't get proper sleep. And that is common, by the way, with the attempts and completions of suicide, where someone is struggling so deeply in their mental distress that they forgo sleep, they forgo eating, they get in this state, and that will definitely influence.
Ringing of the ears.
Yeah,
that I've heard that before. I mean, in fact, I have that actually on a very low level, and it's so absolutely annoying.
Right.
But as you research this, you read of people that actually take their life because of the ringing of the ear. But the ringing of the ear doesn't cause them to do that.
Right. It can influence.
It can influence.
Yeah. And so I want to really spend some time talking about a condition that is highly associated with suicide, and most Christians, but even most seculars, don't know about it, and that is akathasia. We mentioned this in the previous video, but
give me an English word for this.
Well, there's not really an English word. Essentially,
what does is this Greek? Is it Latin? Is it what?
Well, I don't even know where it's from, to be honest with you.
Transliteration of something?
No, it essentially describes the condition that is both physical and mental. When someone is taking, and this happens with what we call antipsychotics, but also antidepressants, and people, and it happens during withdrawal as well. So if someone goes off of these drugs, whether it's a tapering process or a cold turkey, they experience many times what we call akathasia. And so it's almost like if you can think of a torture situation where you're being tortured at every level. You're talking about the ringing of ears, but something even more intense. This past year, in 2020, I received numerous calls of people going through this. One young lady described it as demons trying to come out of her chest. Another one that ants were biting her and burning her. So a burning, it's a very difficult thing to describe if you've not gone through it.
So it could be analogous to detox, where a person's coming off drugs and they're strapped down, sweating and shaking.
And that's right. And that's an excellent way to state it. Your body is essentially trying to get back to a normal state. It's been in a very defensive state because of the foreign substance and the mechanism of the drug. Is it self-destructive?
So akathasia is the tunnel that you go through from abnormal, or from whatever the issue is, and you're coming out of it to a normal way of living. It's that process.
Correct.
Of akathasia.
Correct. But it can happen while under the influence of the drug as well. So not just in the withdrawal. It is an effect. Now they'll list it as a side effect on most big pharma, websites and on the packaging, but oftentimes the side effect is the actual effect, and this is one of the effects. There's more and more research and literature being distributed and done on this topic, but I'm seeing a large percentage of suicides now really coming down to this idea of akathasia. And it's important to explain why, because we talk about the motives of the heart,
Right.
and we've already discussed that a lot of the motives are to escape a situation, escape life, escape relationships, escape whatever it is. But in this case, it's actually not wanting to end life. It's an escape from the toxicity and torture of the drug. One of the illustrations I use in my book, Suicidal Ideations, is 9/11. We witnessed a similar situation where people who were trapped above the attacks of the planes had to make a decision. Either they would continue to be in a torturous state of extreme heat, the smell of the fuel, the panic. I mean, this was not something, and some of them were actually being burned. It wasn't just extreme heat. But it was a situation where they couldn't, just stop and say, Lord, deliver me, and I'm just going to sit here and wait. They either had to commit to saying, I'm going to hopefully be rescued, or I can't take this anymore. And we saw in these videos people jumping out of these buildings. They were committing suicide.
Right.
Now, they didn't go to work that day and
Right.
say, I want to end my life. Many of them didn't have, you look at them, many of them were Christians, many of them were very content with their lives. That was not their mindset at all. That wasn't their ideation. But they were put in a physical situation where they were so tortured and in such physical distress that they couldn't take it anymore. And these are the calls that I get, and many of my physician friends are dealing with as well. The people just in excruciating pain, both mentally and physically, in this condition they call akathasia. Famous psychologist Jordan Peterson, who's a secular Canadian psychologist, just went through a similar situation, detoxing from benzos, getting off of benzos. And he's talked a lot about it, even calling it a living hell, and wouldn't wish this on his worst enemy. It's a very serious and dangerous thing. And a lot of people don't realize that the FDA for years now has been showing that these drugs, and I'm quoting, cause suicidal ideation. So, or increase suicidal ideation is the exact phrase that they use. And that's called the black box warning. It's required on all antidepressants and all antipsychotics. And the reason is because of this agitation. You're taking an antagonist, which means you're taking a drug that works against the nervous system. It's actually attacking healthy function in order to have its effect. And what that does is create all kind of other problems. And it's just not an issue that we're talking about enough. And so you see drugs involved in a lot of Christian suicides. And it's not that they're wanting to end life. They're wanting to escape the torture of what is occurring. A lot of the pastors that have committed suicide over the last couple of years, that is both relational. One in particular, Jared Wilson, actually presided over a funeral of suicide the very less than 24 hours before he took his own life. That relationship, what we talked about in previous videos, was very influential. But he constantly talked about that he was on antidepressants, and that was a huge impact in his life. So you add all these things together, and it becomes this perfect setup, if you would, where your thoughts are diminished even by the sedative effect or tranquilizer effect, depending on the drug. And then you add in the irritability, the anxiousness, the panic, the pain that's going on. And a lot of people are taking their lives because of akathasia.
And not just prescribed drugs, but I was thinking about narcotics, illicit drugs, also alcohol.
Right.
My father was a alcoholic, and it was his sedative, it was his medication. He did not deal well with life, and so he just continued to drink alcohol as a way of sedating him. He was for most of the time, he was what we call a good drunk. He sedated himself, but whenever things got rough, he could never come out of that, and so he just stayed into that alcoholic path. For him, it was a form of suicide because it eventually killed him. I mean, the drug, or the alcohol in this case, eventually killed him, but he could not, in his own thinking, and part of it was like, also, we were not Christians, and so we weren't even, I mean, there were no other options, honestly. It's the world that we lived in. It's a very black, dark world that we lived in. And so that, for him, seemed the only way that he could function. And so it was what you called, in our private talks, you talked suicide by proxy, to where it eventually happened to him, where it took his life, but those were choices that he made. So biology doesn't cause it, as far as it made me kill myself.
Right.
But it's a strong influence where a person is entrapped, where they're in the top of a building, or they're in some kind of situation. I think about POWs, for example, where
Right.
this just seems like the only way out. So they make a moral decision. They decide to do it.
Yeah, and I think it's important in a video like this, if you are watching this and you're on a prescribed psychotropic drug, it's important that you go to a knowledgeable physician who understands akathasia. Not all physicians understand that, as well as that understands what's called de-prescribing. So if you're wanting to relieve yourself of these drugs and you're going through akathasia, you need to go get professional medical help. We're not giving advice on that here. We're just simply discussing and laying out the facts that you can make a discerning understand. We want to save lives. It's grievous to me to see people that I've even known who are under the influence of these drugs, and the families have no idea that these drugs were leading in a very intense way towards these choices. And it wasn't, again, the motive was not to escape life. It's to escape the drug's control. And those are two different things. Just like the 9/11 people didn't want
Right.
to end their life, they wanted to end the torture that they were under.
Right. So we're talking about suicide. We've been a lot. This is covered in all of these, what we've talked
And a
about
lot
in
more.
this series. Yeah, in his book Suicidal Ideations. And yeah, so there's no way that we can do enough videos to communicate what he has shared in that book. And so I would encourage you to get it. You can click on the description or the link here in the description of this video. But in this one, the big idea, akathasia, it is the word that describes the intensified suffering that you're going through because of maybe prescribed or illicit drugs, or a seemingly despairing situation that you're in. Suicide seems to be the option, and so that's the word akathasia. But the big idea with that, biology doesn't cause it, but it can cause suicide, but it can influence it. If you would like to talk to us about this, if you have questions, please, you can ask those. We'll make sure that those questions get to us. Perhaps you have another topic that you want to talk about, or you would like for us to talk about. We'll be glad to do that. Just let us know, and we'll add it to our list. We want to serve you in the best way that we can. We do have at least one more. What's the next video we're doing on this?
Going to get some practical help for the helper. How can we biblically help people who are struggling?
Yeah, and that's the subtitle of his book, Suicidal Ideations. We want to be able to speak into this and help people in a very practical way. Thank you so much for watching Life Over Coffee with Daniel Berger, Rick Thomas. God bless.